This talkative parrot helped finger a killer.
Pretty intriguing to find that it was a website for a gun, and just so happened to be the same gun that was used to my husband.
Just kept going over and over again, the same all, and it sounded like two different voices.
If I could give that duck a medal, I would.
The following stories tell the tale of 3 incredible pets that helped solve murders. We have a parrot who repeated word for word what was said leading up to his owner's murder, a pet duck who found a dead body, and a cat whose fur ended up helping to track down its owner's killer. Stay tuned.
This talkative parrot helped finger a killer. You heard right. The bird's owner, 45-year-old Marty Durham, was found shot to death at his home outside Grand Rapids, Michigan. His wife was also found badly injured with a gunshot wound to the head. Cops at first thought they were both crime victims. Then the parrot named Bud turned into a stool pigeon, suddenly squawking what sounded like a reenactment of the murder.
Glenna Johnson and Marty Durham met when they were just teenagers in the 1980s in Michigan. He had been in a buddy's garage working on a pickup truck when Glenna happened to be hanging out. The two hit it off, and Marty quickly became interested. Glenna felt the same way, and the pair would end up going on a date the following weekend at a drive-in movie theater. The pair had similar personalities, with each of them being fairly quiet and reserved. Marty liked to go hunting and fishing, while Glenna was very family-oriented and helped to take care of her younger siblings. Their relationship was fun and sweet, but not long-lasting. They both made the mutual decision to part ways. When Glenna was just 17 years old, she made the surprising decision to marry a man who was 5 years older than her. Despite the age difference being pretty significant, Glenna and her then husband made things work and ultimately had a few children together. Scott also moved on with his life. He got married to a woman named Christina in 1991, and they had 3 children. They were both still very young at the time. Their marriage was bumpy at times, but they still really loved each other.
Apparently it was love at first sight for him because he was very drawn to me. Marty and I got married in 1991. It was quick, it was fast, it was fun in the beginning.
Marty's life was forever changed one day when he was driving home from work. As he was crossing through an intersection, a truck ran a red light and crashed into him. Marty nearly died as a result of his severe injuries, and in fact, he was even brain dead for a short period of time, but the doctors were able to bring him back.
Pretty much ran just about over the top of the vehicle, and it crushed Marty inside.
He was rushed to the hospital where he remained in a coma for some time. Nobody knew if he was going to survive or what sort of life he would have if he did. There was no telling if he would be paralyzed or even have brain function. Marty did wake up, but sadly, he was not the same person any longer.
He suffered a closed head, frontal lobe brain injury, shattered his pelvis, he literally split his jaw in half.
I remember just having this feel of a relief when Marty came out of the coma, but not knowing what the effects was going to be.
He had very few memories of his recent life and didn't even remember being married to Christina. His whole personality changed, and he wasn't the kind, gentle person those who loved him once knew.
Dad, did you call me?
He became controlling, and a darkness about him. His physical injuries also took a toll upon him, as he was no longer able to function as he once did. He could barely even take care of himself, and he suffered from severe pain.
God, when Marty didn't remember me, it was heartbreaking. Everything just went upside down. It was never the same after that. It was terrible.
Christina did her best to help make things better. She helped Marty to bathe and dress himself. She cooked for him and tried to cheer him up, but nothing worked.
We did rehab for over 1.5 years before he could really fully walk, talk, eat on his own, and be able to care for himself.
He gained his physical capabilities back, but he was never the same personality-wise again.
He lost a lot of his filter. His humor, his attitude became really dark.
No, slide in the corner.
She even came to the conclusion that the man she had loved and married wasn't there anymore and that they needed to part ways.
I believe I fell out of love with Marty after the accident. I decided to end things and get a divorce.
Marty went out and got himself a new home, allowing Christina to continue living in the home that they once shared. He took pride in his home, which was set on a good piece of land, and he worked hard to care for it. Around this time, he ended up hearing that Glenna and her husband were also going through a divorce. Now, Glenna he remembered from before his accident. He ended up reconnecting with her, and the two hit it off as if no time had passed.
I believe even though she married Bob, she still always had strong feelings for Marty. It's almost like they were destined to be together.
They began dating again, and after just a short period of time, she ended up moving in with him. 2 of Marty's sons were also living in the home at the time. It was decided that Glenna's children would continue living with their father, so they wouldn't have to go through any more serious transitions. At the home, Marty's African gray parrot named Bud also lived with them. Bud would end up playing a very important part in this story. Glenna and Marty were eventually married and did everything together, from going on walks to gambling at the casino.
They liked the casino. That was just one way for them to pass the time and kind of something that they enjoyed.
They seemed like the perfect couple and appeared to be extremely happy.
Marty became her everything. He was number one.
But every relationship has its downsides. For this relationship, it was the personality changes that occurred within Marty since his accident. Aside from being very controlling, he also had to know where Glenna was and what she was doing at all times.
Marty told Glenna how she should dress, how she should wear her hair. He just wanted her to be exactly how he wanted her to be.
As you can imagine, this put some strain on their relationship, but also on everyone in the house. In fact, as soon as Marty's sons had the opportunity, they moved out of the home.
My sons, Glenna and Marty, all lived together probably about 5 or 6 years, and the boys moved out when things got tough.
Those who knew Marty and Glenna knew things were difficult.
His moods were very challenging at times. You know, his health was very challenging, and, you know, he didn't always express that he was hurting.
Being a little bit physically challenged, I think he needed control.
Eventually, May of 2015 came around, and Marty and Glenna's neighbor happened to notice that she hadn't seen them leave their home in a while. She decided to go over and check on them, knock on the door, but nobody answers. She peeks in the window but can't see anything, so she just goes home. 3 days later, the neighbors still hadn't seen either Marty or Glenna emerge from the house, and she started getting really concerned. She heads back over to the house and knocks on the door, again, not receiving any answers. This time she actually tries the doorknob and realizes that the door is unlocked. Convinced that something terrible must have happened, the neighbor enters the home and begins calling out for Marty or Glenna. She doesn't see anything out of place on the main level of the home, so she makes her way up the stairs.
She heard the dog and she was walking to where the dog was. The dog was in the bedroom, and ultimately when she looked into the bedroom, that's when she saw Marty and Glenna.
Marty and Glenna were both motionless in bed, and there was all over the room. Believing that they were dead, the horrified neighbor ran out of the house as fast as she could and called the police.
It's at 9242 East 128? Correct. There's 2 bodies on the floor, DOA. There's shells on the bed, all over.
When the police arrived at the scene, they too believe that both Glenna and Marty are dead. It's not until they've already been at the home for nearly an hour that they realize that she actually still has a pulse. Upon discovering this, they rush her to the hospital to try to save her life.
Law enforcement had been on the scene for 50 minutes or more, and nobody had bothered to check the pulse of Ms. Durham.
Bedford, get the first responders up to the residence. One in here is not deceased.
Meanwhile, it is confirmed that Marty has already passed. It was determined that Marty suffered several gun wounds, and Glenna also had some shots to her head. The police discovered the house was a complete mess and that there was a firearm hidden under the couch.
A Ruger single 6 revolver was found underneath the love seat in the living room of the residence. The Ruger belonged to the father of Marty Durham. That, in addition to some other guns, were being stored for safekeeping by Marty in the gun safe.
The gun was believed to be the murder weapon and taken in for evidence. Their first thought was that they needed to determine if this was some sort of burglary gone wrong, but they found no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, and the door was still in good working order. It didn't seem as if this could have been a fight between two lovers. After all, this couple was loved by many and appeared to love one another very much. What could have happened to cause this horrific, tragic scene? At this point, police believe that Glenna is going to be the primary witness that will help them piece together what happened. The only problem was that she was still unconscious and far too injured to answer any questions. She would likely survive her injuries, but there was no telling when she would return to consciousness. When the police waited to see what the future held for Glenna, they began to do some research on the couple's lives. As it would turn out, there was a lot more than what reached the surface. Marty had been prescribed painkillers to help treat the chronic pain left over from his accident. These were actually opiates, but he wasn't actually taking them as was prescribed by a doctor. He was only just taking enough to get by, and then he and Glenna would illegally sell the rest.
I know they get painkillers. That's the only thing that makes sense to me right now, is somebody knew they had painkillers and wanted them.
They could make a pretty penny by doing this, sometimes earning as much as $4,000 per bottle. Marty's cousin Scott had found out what he and Glenna had been up to and had warned him against this dangerous behavior. He told Marty that if he was really going to do this, then at the very least he should have customers meet him somewhere instead of turning up at his house.
So I warned him a couple of times about that. Because a couple of times they came to their house to pick him up. Whoever it was that he was selling to.
But Marty ignored this advice and continued to allow those interested in buying the drugs to meet him at his house.
The opiate problem in Michigan, it's quite bad. I believe Marty and Glenna started dealing prescription pills to subsidize their income a little bit.
This information was very valuable to the police because it gave them a possible motive. A deal gone wrong could have occurred at Marty and Glenna's home. It would be simple, really. The person would have been invited over and let directly into the house. From there, all they would have to do is pull a gun on the unsuspecting couple and do what they wanted from there. This would explain why there was no forced entry into the home.
It has to be somebody they know. Can you tell me if their door was kicked in or not? Because if that door wasn't kicked in, they know the person. Okay. They locked that door. It doesn't matter if it's the middle of the day, that door's locked.
Those closest to the couple, including Marty's sons, believed that there was a lot more to the story. They said that they had witnessed the couple fighting a lot and that when they fight, things could get brutal.
Did they ever fight?
Yeah, they would fight and bicker, but...
How do you mean?
Just argue about stupid stuff, but nothing too serious ever.
Both Glenna and Marty would threaten physical violence upon one another. While Marty seemed to say things in the moment that he didn't really mean, Glenna seemed to really mean these threats and took them seriously. Marty's sons believed it could have been Glenna who did all of this.
You said something that Glenna and your dad would joke around about stabbing or killing each other. Tell me about that.
Honestly, she would always say it, but my dad would say it back to her. You could tell my dad was joking when he would say it back. But when she would say it so seriously. She just always creeped me out. I always told my family if anything ever happens to my dad, she did it. She's crazy.
While Glenna remained in the hospital, Marty's children were given permission to enter the house.
So the night of the incident, police officer had given my kids permission to enter the house the next day to retrieve the bird and any valuables in the house.
Marty's daughter was particularly interested in going through the paperwork in hopes of figuring out what could have gone on leading up to this horrific event. She ends up finding a manila envelope that has several letters inside. The letters are written by Glenna and addressed to her children.
We all felt they were suicide notes.
As she read the letters, she saw that in these letters, Glenna was apologizing for being a bad mother. It soon became clear that these were likely intended to be goodbye letters for her children.
There was 3 letters to her children and to her ex-husband. When the kids found the letters, they called the detective that they had spoke with the night before.
The only problem was that the alleged suicide part of her plan was not carried out because she ended up surviving everything that happened. Marty's children did end up turning over these letters to the police, and it soon became clear that the case was taking a new direction. Police now believe that this could well have been beyond a deal gone wrong, and that Glenna really could have planned to kill her own husband. But there was a problem with this theory, and that was that the believed weapon, a gun, was found underneath the couch downstairs. Meanwhile, both Glenna and Marty were found upstairs. Could Glenna have really managed to not only shoot her husband and then herself and still make her way upstairs to their bedroom? Apparently, that is exactly what happened.
After shooting herself twice, Glenna Durham hid the weapon. She laid down next to her husband to die in the bedroom and was found alive May 13th by her neighbor.
As it would turn out, there was even more to the story that would be discovered as those involved dug a little deeper. To the surprise of even those closest to this couple, the house they shared was actually expecting to be foreclosed in only a day. This was because they had failed to pay their mortgage and actually owed over $5,000 that they had not yet paid.
The house was about to go up for a sheriff's sale as a result of the foreclosure process, and the sheriff's sale was actually ironically going to be held on May 12, 2015, the day before the bodies were found.
It would also be discovered that Marty had trusted his wife to take care of the bills each month, and that she was also the one in the family who was in charge of his money.
My dad was always really good with his money. I don't know, the stuff I'm finding right now just doesn't make sense to me. It's like he actually let her take everything over is really surprising because he's really anal about making sure his bills are paid on time.
But he seemed to be unaware of how Glenna was actually spending the money. In fact, Glenna had gambled much of their money away. It's not clear if Marty knew just how dire their situation really was.
So Glenna took over the finances?
That's what I assumed because I found her foreclosure papers ripped up in her drawers.
It seemed that the only way Glenna saw to escape her situation was to kill Marty and then herself. This would explain why, in the letters to her children, she said she felt like a failure.
I believe Glenna killed Marty because her gambling got out of control. She lost the house behind his back.
But that's not all. Police actually looked into Glenna's phone records and saw that she researched the exact gun that was believed to be the murder weapon. At this point, police are really beginning to piece things together and build a case against her. Still, they would have to wait for her to wake up in order to properly question her.
It's pretty intriguing to find that it was a website for a gun, and just so happened to be the same gun that was used to kill her husband.
In the meantime, most of Marty's family had come to their own conclusions about what had happened and believed that Glenna had done it.
From day one, I believe that the Durhams thought that Glenna was responsible for this and have hated her as a result of it.
The only one who was skeptical about this was his cousin. He truly believed that Glenna loved Marty too much to ever do such a thing.
Glenna would have never did it. She would have never Marty. She loved him too much.
Finally, Glenna woke up out of her coma and was soon questioned by the police. She denies having anything to do with her husband's murder and claims that she doesn't remember any part of the shooting. Police consider the fact that it was possible she really did kill her husband, but simply didn't remember as a result of her traumatic brain injury.
The detectives wanted to talk to her. She said, I have nothing to hide, so we can. And they took us in a little room and interviewed her.
So, what do you remember about the incident?
I don't remember any of that. I just know that I woke up looking for my husband.
You may not know what happened. It may not be in your memories anymore. But we have to look closer at this. That gun was from the safe in your house. In fact, you even looked up on your phone information on the gun that was used. We can't ignore the facts. All the stuff that we have, it just has you and Marty in the house. We didn't find any evidence of someone else being in the house. But I think something went horribly wrong that night. Maybe with a fight about finances. Maybe he was going after you about something.
I'm thinking you already got me guilty when I wasn't even hurt. I just go back up because I love him so much. He's all I can. You don't understand.
With Marty and Glenna being the only people in the house that night, there were no other witnesses to help determine what really happened.
I think as time went on, we started getting a little worried that no one was going to be arrested. An arrest seems to be the ultimate goal. That's all you think about.
This is when a very important character in the whole story comes in. Marty's pet parrot, Bud. Marty absolutely loved Bud, who was an incredibly intelligent bird and whose lifespan was expected to be incredibly long. After Marty's death, Bud had been given to Marty's ex-wife, Christina, to care for. Not long after Christina took the bird in, she started noticing some pretty strange and distressing behavior that would end up helping the police solve the case.
Probably about a month or so after Bud got here, I would hear him scream and squawk, and it would happen a lot at nighttime. But then one day, literally, he just kept going over and over again, the same "oh," and it sounded like two different voices.
Bud was repeating what appeared to be the words exchanged on the night of his owner's murder.
No, no. Shut up! Get your over now! No! No! Don't shoot!
And then the "don't shoot," that struck me. I heard it.
Don't shoot!
And that like ends with "don't effing shoot."
Immediately, Christina realized what was going on. The parrot was reliving the traumatic events of Marty's murder.
I felt it. I literally felt what the bird was going through.
Bud is an African gray parrot like this one. They are a very intelligent species and are especially good at mimicking human speech. Animal experts say African grays are very sensitive to traumatic events.
Christina recorded Bud's words and turned them over to the authorities, who took them very seriously.
Prosecutor Ellsworth Stay says he believes the parrot witnessed everything.
The parrot was in the home when the murder was committed.
Glenna was soon charged with shooting her husband 5 times and killing him, and then shooting herself in a failed murder-suicide attempt. Law enforcement is confident that it was financial problems that caused Glenna to make this horrible decision to take her husband's life.
On the day of the their house was being sold in a sheriff's sale, which is a foreclosure type proceeding.
Would Bud's words and the rest of the evidence against Glenna be enough to take her down? Thankfully it would.
Glenna Durham was just convicted and was clearly not happy with the verdict.
And what about poor Bud, who had not only lost his owner but was forced to relive this tragedy? He now has a happy, stable home with Christina, yet it doesn't seem that he will soon forget what happened.
When Bud says those words, I feel like it's being relived in front of me. My house goes cold with the feelings, the emotions of that night.
Glenna Durham was rightfully sentenced to life in prison. Her family still do not believe that she is guilty.
I will go to my grave. My girl is being framed.
It's always been about those drugs to me. That somehow, some way, those drugs have something to do with it.
A pet duck has helped investigators in Western North Carolina close a missing persons investigation that began more than 2 years ago. On April 21st, 46-year-old Angela Walmsley and 50-year-old Mark Barnes were formally charged with first-degree murder in connection with the death of Walmsley's grandmother, Nellie Sullivan.
Officials have yet to determine exactly at what point in time or how Nellie was murdered, but they believe she has been dead for several years. It wasn't the police that first found what was left of Nellie Sullivan. In fact, the circumstances surrounding the discovery of her body are almost unbelievable. What ended up happening was that in April of 2022, a family in a North Carolina trailer park were keeping a duck as a pet. But the duck slipped out of the home, and they had to go chasing it down in order to retrieve it. The duck ended up going underneath the trailer, and the owners also had to go partially under it to rescue it. It was there that they made a tragic and horrifying discovery. A container hidden underneath was being used to hold Nellie Sullivan's body. At the time, people unrelated to her or her husband were renting the trailer. When they found out what was hidden under their home, they called the authorities. The sheriff presiding over the case praised the duck in helping to finally locate Nellie's remains.
Apparently the duck ran underneath the trailer at 11 Beady-Eyed Lane, and as they were chasing after their pet duck, they ran across the container that Nellie Sullivan was located in. If I could give that duck a medal, I would.
It is believed that Nellie wasn't actually killed at the location she was found, but moved there. Nellie went missing back in 2020. She was elderly, suffered from dementia, and had other physical health problems. Her case was treated as a missing persons investigation.
A couple initially charged with concealing a woman's death is now charged with her murder. Deputies say last week human remains were found at a home on Beady-Eyed Lane in Candler. The victim was identified as Nellie Sullivan. Today, deputies charged her granddaughter, Angela Wamsley, and her husband, Mark Barnes, with murder. They used to live at the home. Deputies say the current renters there found something on the property that led officials to the remains.
As it would turn out, the couple were actually pretty familiar with law enforcement and had a pretty dark criminal past before they were even arrested in connection with the horrific and heart-wrenching Nellie Sullivan case.
The couple has been on law enforcement radar since 2020. They previously faced several drug and animal cruelty charges. Last year, they were charged with concealing Sullivan's death. It was also discovered the pair had been filling her prescriptions after her death.
The couple actually stooped even lower than just filling her prescriptions after her death. They were also allegedly collecting her security checks. This case has not yet gone to trial, and it's clear that there is a lot of information that is still ongoing and has not been released to the public yet. If this couple are convicted in connection to this murder, it is likely that they will spend a significant amount of time behind bars, if not the rest of their lives. It is hoped that justice is reached sooner than later out of respect not only for Nellie Sullivan's life, but the legacy of all who knew and loved her.
In 1989, near the Pocono Mountains in Pennsylvania, 19-year-old Lori Auker left for work. She was never heard from again.
Liftoff of the 20...
It was NASA technology, a fly, and the family cat that helped solve her disappearance in a most unusual way.
Lori Ann Auker was a 19-year-old woman who was going through a custody battle at the time that she went missing.
Lori was a very sweet girl. She was a typical 19-year-old. She had a lot of goals and aspirations for her future as far as becoming a veterinarian and had a great deal of interest in animals.
Lori became pregnant when she was still in high school and ended up having a child named Matthew. She and her child's father, Robert, ended up going through a divorce, and she struggled to get by after they split up. She survived off of welfare checks and minimum wage. At one point, she even lost her apartment and had to live in and out of a really cheap hotel, and sometimes with family. After her split with her husband, she dated once in a while, but only casually. Lori worked at a place called Pet Palace at the mall. Her job was her passion.
On May 24th, 1989, while Matthew was at Robert's house, Lori prepared for her usual 4 to 9 shift at the pet store. After packing a snack, Lori left for work, but she never arrived. Lori's supervisor called looking for her.
And I asked them if Lori had left for work, and her father said that she had. And I said, well, has she called or anything? Because she's not here at the store yet. He said, no. He said, but this makes me very worried.
Lori's concerned father drove the route that she would typically take to work. He was worried that she could have had car problems. He eventually found her car in the parking lot near the pet shop. So, Lori had made it to the mall and supposedly disappeared sometime after. Could she have been abducted? Nobody knew. The police searched the mall and asked employees and shoppers if they had seen anything, but nobody had. It was believed that her ex Robert could have had something to do with her disappearance, but he denied seeing her at all that day. For weeks, the community searched for Lori, until eventually a female jogger noticed what appeared to be a skeleton. This body would turn out to belong to Lori. Her body was badly decomposed and there were no organs left. Because of how disintegrated the body was, it was going to be difficult to understand what actually happened to this poor woman. But the good news is that at the time, science was really advancing, and it was becoming easier and easier to detect who people were killed by and whom. And some of these studies involved blowflies who were able to detect the stages of decomposition, even from a mile away. This helped determine a timeline for when Lori was likely killed. But that's not the only way that technology advanced and helped in this particular case. Security footage was also starting to become more of a common thing. Law enforcement were able to use footage taken from an ATM to see that Lori got into a Chevrolet Celebrity not long before she went missing. This just so happened to be the car that her ex, Robert, had been borrowing from his dad at the time. Even stranger, this car had been sold by Robert's family the day after Lori went missing. Things couldn't have seemed more suspicious, but police needed access to the vehicle in question to test it for evidence regarding the murder. Luckily, they were able to track it down and locate the current owner. When they tested it, they ended up finding the fur of the cat that Lori kept as a pet, as well as a few strands of her own hair. This was what was ultimately needed to convict Robert and ensure justice. So there we have it. We often underestimate pets and what they're capable of, but this is truly 3 cases that would not have been solved if these astute pets were never a part of them.